Hey pals, I'm here today to talk about the books I would like to reread. So I just want to preface this video with a couple of sort of explanations, I guess. All the books you see behind me are books I have read, and there's a lot more books that you can't see. But in terms of how many books I have read over all the years of sort of tracking my reading, and like as an adult reader, I guess, I haven't got the vast majority of books that I read, and that's because I only keep books that I really enjoyed and think I would one day like to reread. So nearly all the books behind me would have got 4 or 5 stars. Every now and again a book slips through. If, for example, I've read all of an author's work, the vast majority of all their books are 4 or 5 stars for me. Like one book wasn't, and I just want to keep the whole collection, but I'm quite strict about that. There are a few books behind me that I need to unhaul because I don't always immediately get rid of a book. Sometimes if I enjoyed a book like 3.5, 4, I'll be like, oh, maybe I would reread that and I'll keep it. And then the longer I look at it on my shelves, I'll be like, oh, actually, I don't think I ever will. So there are a few that I need to get rid of, but in large part, I've kept all the books that you can see because I intend to reread them. So doing a reread TBR in some ways can feel slightly redundant. However, it's not, because I have several hundred books here and I 100% have priorities. I have been doing this channel now, like I said, for 10 years. I started the channel when I was 22, and I pretty much stopped reading when I went to university. I just didn't read, and I watched a hell of a lot of TV and just did lots of studenty things that were not reading. And so I picked reading back up after university, but pre that, I reread so much. Like as a child and a teenager, if I enjoyed a book, I would have read it at least 5 times. And it was really common for me to finish a book, read the last sentence and go right back to the start and just read it again. And that was just my normality. So it is really odd that I've sort of got to this point where I'm someone who says that for the majority of my favourite books, I've only read them once years ago. And so that's why whenever someone says, like, what are your favourite books? I find it really difficult to answer, because I feel as a reader I'm super changeable. There's loads of books I read in like 2015 that are like fabulous style books that I'm not sure I would enjoy now. So like I kept them because I really loved them and I'm interested to pick them up to see if I would still enjoy them, but like I'm unsure. So it's hard to know which books stand the test of time when you are a changeable reader like me. And so I thought what I would do is talk about the 12 priority books that I would like to reread. I would like to think I will get to at least these 12 this year, but we shall see. One thing I would like to add in, I couldn't be bothered to get all of them off the shelves, but I am hoping to start a reread of The Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb, which is 15 or 16 books long. There are 5 individual series, 4 trilogies, one, series of 4 books in. And I really enjoyed the first 9 books, and then I felt like the last 2 series weren't as strong, so I'd like to at least read the first 9 again this year. I have only read all of those books once, except for the first one, which is Assassin's Apprentice. I have reread that a couple of years ago, and I intended to go on and reread them all, and then because of all the new releases I get pulled in by, I didn't. So I originally read all of those books, I think back in 2015, 2016, so it has been quite a few years. That like I remember them being my absolute favourite fantasy books. I keep trying to read new fantasy, and in large part I'm just like disappointed. So and that's another reason why I really want to reread, because I'm like, I try all these new books and a lot of the time I'm like, oh, that was just rubbish, like, or just okay. And then I'm like, why read a rubbish or okay book when you could be rereading a book you loved? So I'm just trying to embrace that more this year. Some of these books will be very dusty because I haven't picked them up in a long time. I've tried to put these books in order of like how long ago I read them, and I could have checked that on Goodreads, but I've been too lazy. So this first one, I absolutely know that I read this in 2006 when I was 16, and that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. So when I was a student, I was starting an A-level in English literature, one of the A-levels I was doing, and our teacher gave us a list of I think around 15 books, and this is when we went on like a welcome to the college day, and they gave us this list and they said, try and read one of those books of the summer, because for our first class, as an icebreaker, you're all going to tell everyone about the book you read and what you thought of it. Me being me, I read all 15 of them. And my favourite of the 15 was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I absolutely loved it. And this is a really interesting one because I hear so many people talk about how much they love it, and I have read both the author's other books and really enjoyed both of them as well. But I have no idea if I would enjoy this book now. So this is when I go into with a little bit of trepidation, just because I feel like, from what I hear from a lot of readers, I think it really appeals to younger readers. And I was like 16, so probably I was the right demographic. So I'm intrigued. I could go into this one and just be like, oh, like just annoying. But I'm hoping I will still love it. And like I said, I have read her book since then and enjoyed both of her other books. So yeah, there's that one. I plan to reread it last summer because it would have been half a lifetime on. Like, I would be 32, so like I would have waited 16 more years and then read it. Didn't get around to it, so I'm going to try and do that this year. And this is a winter themed book, so I really should try and read it while it is still cold. It is currently sleeting outside, so maybe it is appropriate to read it now. Haven't got time though, but yeah, there's that one. Then the only other one I have that's pre me starting the channel is The Gift of Rain by Tan Tuan Eng. I read this probably around the time when it came out, which was, oh god, that's loads of other random dates, 2007, so I was probably 17 when I read this, and I have read the author's other book, which is The Garden of Evening Mists. This one was longlisted for the Man Booker Prize in 2007, and I think the other one might have been longlisted as well, and I don't think he's released the book since then. I really enjoyed both of these books. They're always books I think about and would like to reread both of them. But I think this one probably leans more towards my taste in that this is a coming of age story. And this is set in Penang in 1939. You follow 16-year-old Philip Hutton. He's half Chinese and half English, and just feels like really adrift and disconnected. And then he becomes friends with a Japanese diplomat. But yeah, it's at a time of like turmoil for the country. And so it's about, yeah, sort of stuff that's uncovered, secrets and lies. And yeah, I remember really enjoying this. Because it was so long ago, I have no idea if this is a book I will still enjoy, but yeah, fingers crossed. The next one is another chunky one, and that is the Makayoka Sisters by Junichiro Tanizaki. This is translated from the Japanese by Edward G. Seidensticker. And yeah, I loved this one. This is a story set during World War II in Osaka, and you follow this upper class Japanese family, I think 4 or 5 sisters, as they are, it's sort of like a Jane Austen but in Japan. This is very much really slow paced, really focused on the intricacies of like who's going to be married off and have we got enough money to do that, and this is a family we need to get to know because we like the look of one of their sons for one of our daughters. But I just remember really enjoying all the intricacies. I love slice of life stories, and I really enjoyed getting to know the sisters. And there's one scene in this book that I will always remember, which I won't say now because I think it's probably a bit of a spoiler. But yeah, I always think when like a particular scene's really stood out to me, that shows that the writing must have been really good. So yeah, I would very much like to reread this one and see if I still enjoy it as much as I remembered enjoying it the first time around. Then a book that I've always held up as being like one of my absolute favourite books of all time is A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. And I am quite worried about this one because I picked up her newest book. I'm going to put a picture of it here because I can't remember the title. When it came out, I think last year. And initially I was really enjoying it. And then I got about a third, maybe a bit past a third of the way through and DNF'd it and had quite a lot of issues with it. And I'm now worried that I could maybe have the same issues with this book. I felt that a lot of it was quite juvenile, and I also felt that a lot of the characters were really tropey, especially the people that the protagonist meets in the library. You know, sort of one of the characters felt very sort of manic pixie dream girl, and I didn't like some of the language the author used. She used the word hobo a lot in the book, and like that's a slur in Britain. Like we wouldn't say that without, like, if one of my friends randomly said that, I'd be like, what the fuck, like that's not okay to say. But she used it like it was okay to say, and I was just a bit confused. Maybe it's a word used differently in the US to how it is here, but that threw me a little bit. But I remember really loving this book, and I love coming of age stories, and the premise of this is that this Hello Kitty lunchbox washes up on the shore in North America, and a woman who's also called Ruth and also is an author finds that lunchbox, and inside the lunchbox there is a diary of a teenage girl from Japan, and so you read the diary entries, but you also read like the author's thoughts as she tries to find out if this girl is still alive and stuff. And I remember really enjoying it, but like I said, a little bit concerned because of how I felt about her newest book. And the next book is one of my, what I would class as one of my favourite books of all time, and that is Revolutionary Road by Richard Yates. Now this is going to be a really interesting one because the premise of this, you follow this married couple, I think in 1950s America, and they live in the suburbs. The wife is a sort of housewife, she looks after their two children, and the husband works for some business firm doing some boring job. And they both feel like they're not living the life they imagined, and they want to sort of break out of that mould and, you know, do some sort of crazy art type thing and take some risks. And it's about, after they have that discussion and make that decision, what happens from there. It's a very depressing book, FYI. And I loved this because I loved at the time what it said about people sort of just buying into this life of just sort of accepting that like this is enough and this will do and I'll just carry on doing this until I retire and it will pay the bills, versus being someone who takes risks and tries to live a life that they love and genuinely feel passionate about, which is how I view the world. And so I really connected deeply to this. However, at the time I read a lot more books by men. I think a lot of us naturally do that because a lot of books spoken about at school and books that, especially at the time, were pushed a lot were books by men. And I think because of that, I wasn't as good back then at recognising when a man was writing a woman poorly. And actually, now as somebody who reads predominantly books by women, I often, will pick up a book by, not often because I don't often pick up books by men, but when I do pick up books by men, quite often I'll be like, oh, the way at which they've like written women, like the male gaze is like rank. Like I don't need to hear you describe their breasts the first time I meet them. Do you know what I mean? So I'm a little bit concerned because I can't remember if Richard Yates does that. Fingers crossed not, because I really love this. So we shall see. The next one I am like almost 100% sure I will still love, and that is How Green Was My Valley by Richard Llewellyn. This is an absolute beautiful family drama. Really slow focus slice of life about a young boy growing up in a Welsh mining community and sort of following his family, his nuclear and his extended family, and sort of the heartbreaks they go through and the love they share for one another. And again, there's a couple of scenes in this book that I really remember. I tabbed a couple of sections of this book and I've flicked to them every now and again in the passing years and still think they're just absolutely beautifully written. So I'm convinced I will still adore this one and just want to pick it up and relive it all. And then another one, I always find it funny because I do most of my reading at home, okay? So when I read a book outside of my home, I tend to find it much more memorable in the future, even if the book itself wasn't anything special, just because I was reading it somewhere like unusual. And I was reading this book on a coach journey to come home from visiting some friends in London, and the coach clipped another coach and the whole wing mirror was torn off, right? And we had to park on the side of the road for 2.5 hours waiting for them to bring a repair, a replacement coach, move us into the other coach so that the broken one could go off to be fixed. And luckily I was reading a brilliant read, a book that I thought was absolutely fantastic, but I always remember it because of being stuck on that coach. And that is White Oleander by Janet Fitch. I remember this doing the rounds. I think this came out, did it come out in the 90s? Yes, 1999. But I remember when I first started BookTube, probably we're talking like maybe like around 2015 time. I remember this being a book a lot of people were picking up and recommending. And this is a story of a mother and daughter. The mother is quite an awful person, and it is about the really toxic relationship this daughter has with her mother, and it's sort of a relaying of a coming of age story. And yeah, there's just a couple of moments in this book that I really distinctly remember. There's a scene, I won't spoil anything, there's a scene where the daughter meets some students of her mother's who are infatuated by her mother. And she describes her mother as being like a black widow spider in her web. and like, you know, pulling these students in and making them become sort of intoxicated with her, but actually she's just sort of preparing them to be killed. And I remember that just being a really great, you know, a great scene when she described that, much better than I've just done. But yeah, I really love this book, and I feel like thematically I'll still really love this book, and it's been such a long time since I read it. So yeah, let's hope I don't get stuck on a coach this time round. And then these next few are much more recent. So I have this one sort of as a stand-in for Sarah Moss, and that is The Tidal Zone. Now, I would like to reread most of Sarah Moss's books. I really love this, Ghost Wall and Night Waking. So ideally I'd like to reread all three. But if that's not manageable, I would especially like to reread The Tidal Zone. I remember adoring this novel. This is a family drama about it's told from the perspective of the father, which is quite unusual for me. And he is a stay-at-home father who is also, I think, studying for like a PhD. So he's working on that in his spare time, and his wife is a doctor. So it's a sort of inversion of what we're used to seeing in terms of gender roles in families. And I thought the commentary on that was really interesting. I think Sarah Moss is very good at writing about the dynamic of a marriage and who takes on certain roles. She does that really well in Night Waking to do with motherhood, but this is, you know, sort of the inverse of that. And the premise is that their 15-year-old daughter is at school one day and she randomly collapses, her heart stops, they manage to bring her back around. When they get her to the hospital, they can't find any reason for why that's happened. They have no idea why her heart stopped. And it's about how the family move on from that and don't constantly live in fear, and like how do they ever let their daughter leave the house, sort of thing. And this book really examines the idea of life and death and grief and that fear of loving someone so much that you're terrified to lose them. And I love her writing style. I think she writes absolutely beautifully, and just want to reread all of her books, but in particular I'd like to reread this one. Then this next one, I don't know if I gave this 5 stars, but I probably should have done, because I had such a ride reading this book. I've read quite a few books by this author now and had a really mixed reaction to her work. But this one I found so readable, such a page turner, and it was just a joy to read, and that is Commonwealth by Anne Patchett. I recently read and really didn't enjoy The Dutch House, which I think is her most recent release, but this one was just amazing. So this follows 2 families in America. I'm not actually sure when this is, 1964. Yeah, and it moves through to the 80s. And basically there's these 2 families, and if I remember correctly, it opens at a christening of one of the child, and the father from one marriage and the mother from another sneak off to this room together and sort of start an affair at the christening. And it's about how that moment fractures these 2 families, and how those 2 deciding they want to be together sort of forces the children of both families to become siblings, and about like from then on. And I remember there being a moment in this where like a massive twist is delivered. And I remember reading it and being like, literally couldn't believe it. It was like flipping back through the pages, trying to look for hints, and just loved it. Just thought it was absolutely brilliant the way it was delivered. And I really, I've said this a lot of times, I love books where you see people from different perspectives. So you might read from their perspective and really sympathise with them over a certain issue, but then you might see the same issue from somebody else's perspective and realise that actually, you know, there's more nuance to this, and actually, you know, no one's perfect and everyone's sort of at fault. I think this book does a really good job of that discussion. And is really good at looking at like the unsaid moments within families and how they can cause a much bigger deal in the years to come. So I just remember loving this and definitely want to reread it. A book that from the moment I finished it, I was like, I have to reread this, is English Animals by Laura Kay. And this is another book that I gave 4 stars because I remember reading this and loving it, but feeling like for like writing style alone, this wasn't like a 5-star read. But yeah, I think about this book so often. I pretty much remember like every scene in this book, and that says a lot about how impactful this was to me. Like, yes, I read this one a bit more recently, but like, for example, I think I maybe read it quite close to the previous 2, and I do not remember them scene for scene. This to me was just insanely readable, so readable. I loved all the tensions in this book. Again, there's a moment in this where something really big is revealed and I was like, oh my God, literally can't believe this is happening. This book made me feel really angry on behalf of the characters. This book was a joy to read. If you haven't heard of this, in this book you follow a young woman who I think is from Slovakia, yeah, and she gets a job in a country house in England working for this married couple who are sort of middle class and trying to make money from this big country estate they have through various jobs, and they're trying to start a wedding business on the property. The husband is a taxidermist, and they have a couple of other sort of irons in the fire, I forgot the saying. And it's about her sort of being pulled into that, but they're a very chaotic couple and they're incredibly open about all their disagreements. And so it's about her being thrown into this very bizarre situation and sort of being made the third wheel to their marriage, and sort of having feelings for both of them. And yeah, just where that all goes. I loved this. I thought this one was brilliant and can't wait to reread it. And this is one that I could probably, like, just if I had a day free, sit and read like from start to end, because I just remember this being so readable, so can't wait for that. And I don't think she still hasn't brought a new book out. I also heard talk about this one being adapted for the screen, which I would absolutely love. I don't think that's happened yet, so we shall see. And then penultimately, I have Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. I love this book, and this book is a great example of me saying, you know, books where you get different characters' perspectives, because the premise of this, if you haven't read it, I know a lot of you have, is that you get, I think, 5 or 6 sets of short stories. In each set there's 3 stories. A lot of the time it is like a mother, her daughter, and then like one of their friends or like a teacher or something. And this is a perfect example of why you like shouldn't judge people, or you shouldn't assume you know something about somebody's life, and how like 2 or even 3 people can view the same moment so differently, and how not being honest about how you feel can have devastating consequences for other people, because all these things are left unsaid. I loved this, and yeah, there's a few sort of trios within here that were complete standouts for me, and I just found a joy to read. So I'm really looking forward to revisiting these characters. And then lastly, this is a book that a lot of you keep recommending to me. Some of you don't know I've read it, and you are recommending it based on other books I enjoyed, and some of you do know I read it but have recommended that I reread it because you think I will enjoy it more the second time round, and that is A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza. So the reason I think I could enjoy this more the second time round is because I was partway through this book and I was really enjoying it, and something happened in my home life, and I put this book down for weeks and just didn't read for weeks. And then when I went back to reading, I just carried on from where I was at in the book. And so this book has always been sort of had an unfair, you know, an element of unfairness on it, because it was a difficult time, and also I had a massive gap in between reading it. And I've always shied away from rereading it because it's like I don't want it to sort of remind me of that time, but I also feel mean sort of marking it as a book I'll never reread when people keep saying, I think you'd really love it. And I completely see people's point. A lot of people have recommended this to me because of my love of books like The Sleepwalker's Guide to Dancing by Mira Jacobs, and The Arsonist City by Hala Elyan, which this book sort of shares similar themes. This book, I'm trying to remember if this is set in the UK or in America. Where is the author based? Let's have a little look. The author is based... Oh, that's no help. She was born in California, but her mother grew up in Birmingham. So the book could be either place. Some of you are probably telling me this now. But this follows an Indian Muslim family as they prepare for their eldest daughter's wedding. But there's loads of things to unpack about whether all the family members will be there. And from memory, I think you see things from different perspectives in different timelines, which is something I adore. So yeah, I gave this a 4-star at the time, but I really think this is a book that I could enjoy to a 5-star level. And so I would like to give it another chance. So there are all books. I feel like more than anything, that was a recommendation video, because as soon as I sort of picked these books up, I just felt overjoyed with how much I love them all. And right now I just feel like I just want to read them all and not read anything new. But I have books due back at the library, so I can't do that right now. But hopefully I should be able to reread some books later this month. So yeah, I would love to know if you read any of these books, and if so, if you enjoyed them. I'd also love to know what you think of rereading, if you reread a lot. Also what you think about like changing tastes. Do you still say a book is your favourite book if you read it like 8 years ago and you feel like you're a different reader now, all these things I'm interested in. So yeah, let's chat down below. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.